we've been talking since last week about marriage. Today I'm going to talk about marriage some more. And not everybody in here is married, and not everybody's going to be married. Or maybe you're already were married and you're not anymore. So times change and the life situation changes, but I think what I want to share is relevant for all of our different situations. And I hope it is. I hope it's helpful and encouraging. That song that Ethan and the group just presented, Let My Life Song Sing to You. Maybe tomorrow or the next day you won't remember much of what I said. You'll remember I stood up here with a stick. So I have my walking stick. And you may remember that line of that song, and you don't remember the words. So yeah, my life song, but it's the idea of having a bigger perspective in your life, a larger goal. It's so easy to think about my circumstances today, my situation today, and forget that at some point in time, my life will end. And most of what I've said and done will just be forgotten. But is there a message? Is there something that I have contributed that is valuable? And so I apply that. One of the places I apply that is to my marriage. You know, it's easy to start things. It's really hard to finish things. As a pastor, I'm around a lot of couples who are just getting married. I'm also around a lot of couples who are just breaking up. They're divorcing, they're separating, they're done. And so it happens in my family, it happens among my friends, it happens And so people start and they can't finish. We start a meal and we can't finish. We start a job and it's easy to start something, it's hard to finish. And one of the reasons is because our vision just gets to right where we are, right here, right now, and we forget where it was that we wanted to go. So I told you last week, I was studying all about marriage and things I wanted to say, and I looked maybe not all, but I looked at a lot of different parts of the Bible. People teach and talk about or debate. What does that mean? I said, which one would I talk about? Or if I talk about three, which ones? And Lisa often reminds me how excited I get about discussing some philosophical, because I study philosophy, or some theological point in the Bible about what does it mean and what do the commentaries say, and I love that. And she says, most people really, they're not interested in all of that, like something helpful, something practical. And so have a Bible class where people can come and debate it. But what about today? And I was thinking about that. So last week I said, among other things, if you have a question, any kind of a question, I would love to have the question so I can help answer it or try to answer it or say, you know what, that is a great question. I don't know what to say because there are some of those out there. But so far you didn't send me questions. Some people promised but didn't come. So if you're still thinking about it, how do I say this? Don't worry about how to say it. Just put it out there and write it to me or send me a note or come and tell me. But let's go ahead, Cynthia. And I showed the passage I decided since we pray together the Padre Nuestro. And there was a time in my life when I was attending Catholic Mass, and some people told me it's just, everything in the Mass is written down. It's like, they just repeat the Lord's Prayer like it was nothing. They just don't even know what they're saying. That's not how you should pray. And so I said, yeah, that's true. It's just mindless repetition. And I prayed the Rosary, and 10 Hail Marys and 1 Our Father, and 10 Hail Marys and 1 Our Father, and all the way through the Rosary. But then there came a time later in my life when I was with people and we didn't know how to pray. And we could start with the Lord's Prayer. And I said, wow, I'm grateful I was in a place where at least gave me a basis for how to pray. And I grew a little bit older and I realized it's easy to be in one place and criticize the people in another place. But we haven't been in their place. And when we can learn from other traditions, other cultures, other ways. And when I came to this church, and they were already saying the Lord's Prayer, right, Betty? Betty was here before I was. And they said, during the service, we say the Lord's Prayer. And one person advised me, Glenn Yoder, said, keep it in the King James Version. You don't want to change the Lord's Prayer. I said, when they wrote it into the King James Version, the old version, Old English, they had already changed. They picked a language. Jesus didn't pray the King James Version. And so we use the New International Version. But there's a prayer that's memorized and known, the Lord's Prayer. There's another prayer. It's the Padre Nuestro. I call it the other Padre Nuestro. And Jesus prays, and John records a whole chapter in his gospel, and there's a prayer. And in the last verses, I said, this is about marriage. Jesus is talking and he's saying, I just wish that you could be united. You could be together. You could be living your life in such a way that other people would look and say, wow, that's great. And I applied that to my marriage. I said, I don't want a marriage where my kids and my friends look at it and say, poor you. You guys are having a hard time of it. Or they look at me and they say, wow, if marriage is like my dad, my mom, I probably don't want to do that. I think there's got to be more to life. And so for a number of years, I've tried to look at my marriage and say, wow, how are we doing? You can think that's overly critical. I'm not like a hypercritical person. I just kind of look. And so the way I deal with that, I look out ahead and I say, what is the goal? And so if we could have one voice, but not one voice where I'm in charge, or like the joke where we say, my wife, I always have the last word. Yes, ma'am. Or sí, señora. That's the joke. I have the last word in my house is just to say yes to my wife. That's kind of a funny joke. But when we say have one voice, I mean like a blended voice. Like when I got up this morning, Lisa made a fruit smoothie. Okay, she blended some stuff. And we have a little game. Make the drink for breakfast and say, can you guess what's in it? That's always going to be something edible. It's not a bad game. It's like a good game. And try to guess what's in it. I'm always wrong. Lisa can think and test, and it has a smell of something. I don't know, some kind of fruit. And it's a good guess, some kind of fruit. And today it was maracuya, was the hidden flavor. But the thing is, the different things blend in. And somebody who's thoughtful can say, you know what, I think there's mint. I think there's a banana. I think and you sear the different flavors. And so in a marriage and in a family and in a community, even in your workplace, if it's working well, you should be able to distinguish the different flavors. I'll be like, in my house, we have fruit smoothies, and it's a banana and milk, and that's a fruit smoothie. No, you say, you know what, we'll blend other things, other voices, other opinions. And so those are like some of the things. So today, I said, I want to tell you about my experience of the Camino de Santiago, the way of St. James. Took a walk a couple of years ago. And Lisa and I have shared our experience, but this is like my experience, and use it as a metaphor for marriage. And so the Camino. You've heard of the way of St. James. If you haven't, that's okay. I had never heard about it, and a friend went. He said, I'm going to go walk the way of St. James. I was like, what is that? It's a pilgrimage. Like a pilgrimage? Do people still do that? And so I looked it up, and walking across Spain, and I thought, that's pretty cool. He was retired. So I said, that's good to do when you're retired, like maybe. It was like a good idea, but for somebody else. And I remember, and I've talked to people, excuse me, I remember in my own life, there was a point where because of different relationships with different girls, I said, you know what? I'm done with the girls. Girls, forget it. I'll be better off by myself. So I hadn't met Lisa yet. When I met Lisa, it all changed. But I was thinking, that's a good idea. Marriage, girlfriends, it could be a good idea for somebody, but maybe not for me. It's just not for everybody. And I will say, marriage is not for everybody. But I was really it's a good idea. It's out there. And that's how I encountered the way of St. James. I was like, okay, so there's some people who actually have the time and the money or the interest or like that. Like if I had a month to go walk, why would I go to northern Spain? I'll go to somewhere where I can speak the language. It's probably not safe. Like I had a lot of reasons. Okay, another glass of water. Great, thanks, Gail. And so good idea, but it's not really for me. But that changed. Go ahead, Cynth. One day I met a girl, and I started to get interested. And actually, the way I met Lisa is my friend was interested in Lisa. And so he's telling me about Lisa, and we're trying to figure out ways that our group of friends can go out. And one day I'm like, you know what? That's a really sharp girl. Like I like talking to her because we were in a group of friends. And I said, I don't think Lisa is as interested in my good friend as he is in her. I'm going to ask her out. And so here we are. The 30 years have gone by. But just go back for a second, Cynthia. So the interested part, another person told me about the Camino de Santiago. And then they said, you got to watch this movie. And so I watched, the movie The Way. And some of you, maybe you saw it. And I said, it's kind of interesting, the concept of going and taking this long walk and with people. And it could be fun. It could be interesting. And I was curious. And so I started to look it up online. And so on my day off, I would dedicate some time. Lisa said, you're spending too much time on it. And that's like when you're dating. And some people said, you're spending too much time with this girl. I said, well, maybe it's going to be a good thing. And so I was looking it up online, and the Camino de Santiago, go ahead, Cynthia. Here's kind of a map of the starting place to the finish. And if you do all of that walk, if you think in miles, I think that's about 500 miles. And if you do kilometers, about 800. Some people go for a week, and then the next year they go back for another week, and the different things. But it's a long walk. And so it's going to take at least a month, somewhere around 30 to 32 days. Now, we have some people here from France. And the people from France start way up in France. So the little part that says start, that's France. And so they start way up in France and come on down on the Camino. And so people start in England, or they start in Portugal, or they start in Germany. There's some people from Germany. I've met Germans, and they started in Germany. They're just walkers. A lot of Germans on the trail. And in fact, the number 2 nationality, I think, that walks that place is Germans. And they came walking from Denmark. But anyway, so I started to get interested, intrigued, increasingly attracted, and pretty soon I was engaged with the idea. And I use the word engaged because Lisa and I got engaged. At one point I said, you know what, marriage is going to be a good thing, and I want to get married. I've been thinking about it, I've been attracted to it, I was learning about it, and I was like, but this is a commitment for like life. That's the way I looked at it. And my friends had the jokes about getting married is like the ball and chain. You know what a ball and chain is? It's like when they put around on a prisoner in the old days, a chain around his ankle and this big ball so he can't, heavy piece of metal, so he can't go anywhere. It's like you'll just be trapped. Why would you go to one woman and just be trapped in this relationship? You're young. Don't even do that. And I started thinking about it, and it's kind of like, go back, Cynthia. Because I was still attracted, but I hadn't made the commitment. And I'm thinking, if I have a month to go walking, why would I go to Spain? And so you have those ideas. You still have all the options. Now, some personalities, my personality is to have lots of options. Ask my daughter, Natalie, she'll tell you, my dad loves options. I say, well, Instead of the States, if I'm going to hike, instead of Spain, I'll rather go to the States, some places I want to go. All these different kinds of things. But I began to be attracted to the Camino de Santiago because there is some structure there. There are people that come along the whole journey and they say, oh, you're a pilgrim, and they help you. And they show you the way. And it literally happens. Later on when I was walking, I learned if we lost our path, we would go 20 yards off the path and a car would appear or a voice from somewhere and people like, hey, pilgrim, it's that way. And people would redirect you because they could tell who we were. And it provided a structure, and they had meals all along the way that were for the pilgrim. So if you went into a restaurant, they had their regular menu, but they had the pilgrim's menu. And so you had your little credential that said, I'm a pilgrim, and you showed it to them, and then you got the reduced rate and the common meal. But it was good. And I began to realize that marriage also provided a structure and some commitment and some long-term planning and purpose that was going to be good for my life. I didn't always do well with all the different options. I wanted faithfulness and commitment and to enjoy a relationship that could grow and develop and deepen across the years. And so the more I thought about Spain, I said, I think let's look into that. What an amazing thing it would be to actually be on the other side of having done the walk and say, we did this. We did this. And if I wait until I'm 65, I might not get there. So my dad had a big accident when he was 60. And he's still alive, but he can't go walk across Spain. And so from the time he was 60 on, those kinds of options, he didn't have them anymore. I said, what if I wait until I retire? I said, let's go do it now. We started, what would it be like to have actually done this well? So I don't know if I can do it. Walk 500 miles? And I looked on a map from like my hometown to Washington, D.C. It's like, that's like 10 hours in a car. Walk that? No, I don't. What kind of shoes do you need? And I thought of all the things I would need. I said, I can't do that. And so instead of thinking about the details, I looked to the end, the goal, like that song, my life song. I said, you know what? That would be really amazing if we could do it. If we could actually survive the conversation and the silence and the hostels. Hostels, not like bad people. Hostels like places to sleep. Right? And so I thought about the hostels. Hostels, bed bugs, thieves, dirty. Hey, what do I want to... And then I looked at the price of hotels. I said, okay, we just can't afford it, so no. And so everybody stays in a hostel. I said, I don't want to walk across Spain and stay. What kind of place is that? We'll camp. So you can't camp. Interestingly enough, the Germans camp because they say, no, they have their way of thinking, their logic. The Americans don't camp because the rules say no. And a German friend say, you just go ask the owner and say, hey, can we camp here and just stay out of sight and out of mind? And yeah, so the Germans and the French people camped. The Americans stayed in the hostels. But I was attracted, and I was attracted to the end goal. What if a good marriage is possible? What if we were the ones that could do it? What if, and we said, let's do it. So we were committed. We've been preparing, we were planning, we were studying. Committed is when we actually started. Can you see our shadows on there and tell who's who? That's Lisa and I. So I'm the big one. And that's starting out early in the morning, and you just start walking. And it was awkward. I was self-conscious going into a hostel. I've camped and been all over and done different kinds of things, but I'd never stayed in a hostel. And I'm like the person, I don't like to go into new situations and not know what's going to happen. I can talk to people, but I was like, I hope nobody else is at this hostel. Hope it's just us, and how does the shower work and how does this whole thing work? And so I was self-conscious and awkward, and that lasted really only about 2 days. But it was kind of like when we got married. I mean, I was really self-conscious and awkward, and I can't even remember who was at my wedding, and people come and say, hi, I was at your wedding. And I was like, really? Oh, thanks, I had no idea. And what I was doing, what I was getting into, everything I thought about marriage, a lot of it I was just wrong. And everything I thought about that walk, a lot of it I was wrong. And what's good is I mostly had fears about it that turned out to not be a big deal. Sleeping in the hostels was great. And the hostels were super clean. And the whole Spain tourist industry was designed so that every pilgrim, to go into the place, you had to have your credential as a pilgrim. And every pilgrim had to leave the next morning before 8 o'clock. I said, well, that's a little intense if we walked all the day, and why do we have to get up early? But the truth was, everybody got out because they cleaned and inspected, and if you lost something, they kept it for you, and you moved on to the next place. So I had fears and concerns about my feet, about my shoes. What if my knees go? And so I bought some good walking sticks, and a guy made me this. I looked online, and they said, if you take that stick to Europe, when you get on the plane, they're going to take it away. And so I left the stick behind, and it was nicely made, and now it's just a decoration. But so I got some little walking sticks that were great, and they fit in my bag. And I knew I needed them because of my knees and balance and all this stuff. And like 3 days in, I left them somewhere and just walked on. And my fear that I spent time and money and effort, it turned out I didn't need it. And so life is like that. Sometimes we're afraid and we're concerned, and we're afraid of relationships. There's a lot of fear. Why? Because we've heard somebody's bad story. We've seen somebody's bad example. We've been in conflictive situations, and we just want to avoid that. And I almost didn't take the walk because I was afraid. I played a lot of sports in my life, and I never had a knee surgery. And I eventually quit playing basketball because I said, I don't want to have a knee surgery. I saw my dad go through that. It's really not a big deal, but I didn't want it. And I thought, I'm going to walk across that thing, and I'm going to hurt my knee. And then I'm going to be stuck with a bad knee. And for that fear, I almost didn't do it. And in a relationship, we have things like that. And you know what? Just asking for some help, walking a step at a time, there's so many things in our life that we're held back by a fear that we could just get past. I'm worried about my knees, and I have my little wife that didn't even do sports, and she's like, come on, let's go. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm not in shape. And she's like, of course, nobody's in shape to do it. You just start. And so we were committed. We're going along, get isolated. Then we were challenged. And so there I go, and the little bag that I'm carrying is because Lisa wanted to pick up the trash along the way. Lisa was great. I really didn't care. I mean, I wished that somebody pick up the garbage, but I didn't want to. And Lisa, wherever she went, she was going to make it cleaner. And she just pick up trash all along the way. And for 500 miles, 800 kilometers. But you know what? You're challenged because in a transition, you get exaggerated emotions. When you're moving places or things, and maybe some of you are in a transition or in a job, literally your emotions get more exaggerated. You get slight injuries. You get more anxieties. My feet hurt. You see those boots that I'm wearing? I was so proud of my boots. I'd worn those for years, camping, hiking, everywhere. And sure, my knees hurt, my hips hurt. I never realized the problem was my boots. And it really was. I was getting blisters, my knees hurt, and the different things. And I changed the boots and put on an old pair of tennis shoes. And I was like, it's so much better. And you know what? In marriage, we're thinking things. People have told us things, or we've brought these habits from our life, and they're not helpful. I was at a dinner recently, and there were a bunch of guys sitting around with our wives. And so I said to one of the guys, I said, hey, how long have you been married? And it had been a short time, but he said, I think it had been 2 years. And he said, it feels like 15 years. Ha, ha, ha. Because everybody else was an old guy like me. Like we've been married 30 years, 40 years. So I knew right then, he'd heard that joke from older people. And it's a great joke, right? In a group of guys. Ha, ha, ha. It feels like 15 years. But now I'm like, you know what? That's not really a funny joke. Because if it feels like 15 years to you, imagine what it feels like to your wife. And so that's what I said. To my wife, it feels like 2 years. And I thought, I've made those kind of jokes. And you bring this like bad idea, like to make a joke at my wife's expense so that all the guys laugh. Isn't that funny? Because the wives are like, yeah. And inside, who knows what they're thinking. And so you're having these challenges and you've brought these wrong pair of boots, this wrong way of thinking, this idea about how conflicts are resolved, and it doesn't work. And that's what I had to find out. And I had brought the minimum amount of stuff in my pack. And about 5 days into it, I boxed up like 5 more pounds. How was 5 pounds? 7 kilos, something like that. And just got rid of it. I was like, 1 pair of shorts, that's it. 2 shirts, that's it for a month. But when I started, I thought I needed more stuff. And in your life, you think you need more stuff, and you don't. So there was some things to learn about marriage. Lisa and I would get up, one of the challenges, I like to stay up late. Lisa likes to get up early. So we're on the Camino, and Lisa says, tomorrow we're going to get up and get going. I was like, so intense. Why do we have to get up and get going? We don't have to be out of here until 8. This is what I'm thinking. Just intense. We're out here, we're on vacation, and all we're going to do is walk. We have all day to walk, so what do you mean? Whereas tomorrow we're going to get up and get going. And literally, I would have that whole conversation inside me. This was like the first 10 days. And so and she's like, what? What's the problem? I was like, why do we get up and get going? I'm going to get up and I'll get up when I wake up. Say, well, finally we had a talk about it. Because the way we would talk, you guys, maybe, are you bored? It's 12:15, I should quit. Or can I tell a little bit more? So Lisa doesn't mind if I tell this. She knows I'm going to tell. But we had brought our counseling skills, things we learned in counseling, to talk about together. In fact, somebody should tell the kids, Gail, can you tell the kids we're just a little bit over time? Because they're like ready for their parents to walk in. And Lisa would say, can we talk about this? I would like to talk about, this morning when you were upset, or last night you were upset and you said, why do we have to get up and keep going? I was being too intense. I was like, well, now I'd just rather not talk about it. I think we'll just walk in silence. She'll go, okay. So let's walk in silence until the next town, whenever that is. Could be an hour. Okay, yeah, practice silence. That's good. We'll walk to the next town, and Lisa would say, okay, so what have you thought about? I was like, I think that's a trick question. What did I think about? And by now, I've completely forgotten the conflict. And so she'd be upset. She'd be like, well, you were thinking about, we were going to talk about this issue. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, that was a long time ago. Like, I'm good now. So you know what? The exaggerated emotions, those were the kinds of things. After about 10 days in, I realized this is not how I want the walk to finish. We're just like playing the same stuff over and over again. And I'm actually going to have to talk about this. We're just going to have to do it and say, okay, I feel, I think, I thought. And the things I'm always telling you in these small groups, I went through it the hard way. And it's truly amazing. We began to learn to communicate in some new ways. To say, I notice and I prefer. To say, can you help me understand? And I realized how little I listened. It's not a good listener. So that's why I said in my prayer today, the Bible says, James says, you should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Like, I memorized that. My mom made me memorize that when I was a small child. But I still quick to speak, slow to listen. It gets reversed in my mind. So those are the kinds of challenges and the anxieties. And there were some more challenges and more desafíos. And some of the challenges came, and it's like marriage. You're going along, and if you lose sight, there were so many distractions. Lisa and I said, Lisa helped me agree, we're going to focus on our relationship, on communication, on conversation, and on being together and learning to walk together, learning to be together, to have that like blended voice. And you know what the kind of challenges were? As soon as we were out there, we met a guy from Croatia. And Mr. Croatia says, you know what? Beer was invented in Croatia. Now, I don't like beer, so that wasn't like a temptation for me. But he's like, you know why I'm doing the Camino? Because I'm going to make the best craft beer ever. And so I'm out here, I'm doing beer tourism. And so that guy, we ran into him, we walked for a while, he knew everything about beer. And telling me all about beer and all the beers. But you could get distracted. And the monasteries, all the monasteries, I thought, I am going to love visiting these monasteries. They're 800 years old. They're, from the 10th century. El Cid, when I saw the statue of El Cid, I bought a book and went to the museum. But the distractions to look at the history, and there's nothing wrong with history, but you know what I found out? It was easier for me to look at the history than to talk to my wife and sort of say, how are we going to do this? And I had to remember my goal, like my life song, is to get to the end of this thing and to really have improved our communication, to have a good marriage, to have a great marriage. Why not have a great marriage? Is it possible? Because now I'm with the young people and they're like, well, I don't really know if I want to get married. And my friends are getting divorced and saying, this just doesn't work. And I say, is it possible? And I had to keep reminding myself, you know what, that's the goal. And if I don't work on it here, all we have is time and space and togetherness. And so we worked on it, communication, clarification. There are challenges, you could get involved in the food, in the history. People would say, when you get to Burgos, you got to take at least 3 days, get a nice hotel. You've been walking so far, get a nice hotel and go see the museums. I said, hey, Lisa, you want to go see the museum? She said, no, let's keep walking. Let's keep talking. Let's work on us. So it's good, and it was worth it. So the pain, the laziness, all the possibilities, and we had to persevere. We held on to the purpose. And one of the things I want to ask you about in your life that you could say something you could apply for yourself is whatever you're doing in life, are you looking to the bigger picture? Like when I complete this job, when I finish this stage of my life, am I going to look back and say, yeah, I'm proud of the person I'm becoming? We are so focused on what we're doing, we forget the really important is what kind of person we are and who we're becoming. And people, none of you will remember almost anything we ever said at Christ Church. If you're here 5 years, you'll remember a couple of things. You'll remember the way people treated you and the way you were received. And that's what's going to impact you. And so how am I doing with that? Well, we eventually got to the place. There's some rain there. Lisa wanted you to see this picture at the bottom. You can't really see it. This picture, right here, has a hole in the middle of the tree. So it's like the bark is just there, and somehow the tree just kept growing. And like the center of it's gone. And sometimes you may feel like you're in a relationship and the center of it's gone. But you know what? The life can come. And so that's what we were experiencing. There were so many different stories, but I guess I should go on. We ended up with, put the word, what's next, Cynthia? Cruising. I did not know how to translate cruising. That meant we were just going along at a good rate and enjoying it. Somebody give me a word. Cruising is when you're just going down the highway in your car and just like, viajando pero bien. Avanzando, andando. The Uruguayan is always going to kind of understate it a little bit, so it's andando. But we were walking, and a guy met us at a hostel, and he gave us that picture. And he said, I saw you guys, and I was touched by seeing you walking together. Some guy in Then we ran into him, and he said, I saw you a couple days ago, and I took this picture, and I want you to have it, because you'd see people on the Camino. And I thought, you know what? I hadn't thought anything about it. And I realized when we started this walk, and we'd been married, 27 years at that point, we couldn't walk together. I left all of that out. Lisa wanted to stop and take pictures, and I was like, you know what? If you're going to stop like every 10 yards, I'm just going to keep walking, and when we get to the next hill or whatever, I'll wait. But I don't like to. She said, well, just stop. I'm just taking a picture. And I said, I'm not going to just stop and start and stop and start. I'm a big guy, I like to get momentum and just walk. So, it sounds crazy, but that's the way I was, and I wanted to change. And I wanted to walk with her, but I really didn't know how, and I couldn't. I needed some skills, and we worked on it. And so it was amazing to me that we're going along, and all of a sudden I realized, you know what? We walk along together, and we enjoy it. And our life's not perfect, but we're discovering that, and that is possible. And if you're looking at marriage and saying, I don't know, I don't really think that's possible, or John and Lisa are like different, no, we're not different. We learn and try and work, and so we find the togetherness. There's always some different kinds of tension there, but is it the event? Is it the process? Together it makes the journey. It's every day deciding if you're going to get up early. Lisa and I realized I should finish that quote. So we got it tomorrow. We're going to get up and get going. I said, I'll get up when I wake up. And I wasn't like rebellious. It was just, but it was. I was like, don't tell me what to do. I guess was the attitude, and I hadn't realized that. And you know what? Both of us wanted to get up and get going about 7 a.m. But when Lisa said, tomorrow we'll get up and get going, I was hearing 5 a.m.? Because she can do that. And I was thinking, I don't want to leave before 7. But it turned out when we sat and talked about it, we both meant the same thing. We really did. And so we agreed, and it was easy. But it takes some skills, not one or the other or both. Skills require the silence, the communication, listening and talking. And the last thing, I just want to say something about the expectations. So obviously I needed to tell you more things about this, but silence is a big one. I realized I did not know how to be silent, and silence is not just being quiet. Silence meant to be present with my emotions. And it just sounds, for some people, that's so obvious and easy, but for me, that's why when Lisa said, can we talk about this? I'll say, okay, let's talk later. She would assume I was thinking about it, because I agreed to, and I would just forget about it. The negative emotion doesn't exist. So I'll just pretend it's not there and pretend it will go away. In real life, it does because we're busy. So you get busy and do something else. On the Camino, it still waits for you. You're going to walk 6 hours, and Lisa's like, no, let's talk about that. I'm not making Lisa to be the bad guy. Lisa was actually the good guy, saying, we agreed to this, let's do this. And to learn to say, yeah, I guess I was frustrated, or to try to identify how I felt. I needed the time and the space. And it changed me. It changed us. And so now I practice silence. And I say, here in the church, we're going to practice some silence. Go ahead, Cynthia. I'm almost done here. Yeah, trying to learn to be content. We'll leave that for another day. We'll talk more about contentment another time. Go ahead. The expectations. I want to leave you with these 4 things of expectations because they're really important. Like, when are we going to get up? Where are we going to eat? All you have to do when you're on the Camino de Santiago is decide how far you want to walk and when do you want to eat. And could you believe Lisa and I could argue about that? And so expectations is to say, what are my expectations? Conscious. Is my expectation realistic? You should maybe take a picture of this, because about 50% of your conflicts probably could be fixed by working on these things. Is my expectation conscious? Do I know that I have an expectation? Like right now, you could be really stressed because church always gets out at 12:15 at the latest, and we're going on. And were you aware you had that expectation? Is it realistic? Have I communicated it with my wife or my spouse or this person? And did we agree to it? If it hasn't been agreed to it, I may say it, hey, Lise, we're going to do this. If she hasn't agreed to it, it's not a valid expectation. That's a lot of teaching, but you can take the note and you can think about it. An expectation to be valid has to be conscious, realistic, communicated, and agreed to. And so walking the Camino de Santiago helped Lisa and I to discover so much about that, about each other. I want you to write me some questions about marriage, because next week we're going to talk about it some more. You know, we got to the end of the Camino and it was like, okay, here we are. Really, nobody had a party for us. Life was still the same life. The problems were still there. My feet still hurt. My anxiety about my knee, but now I had done it. But you know what? On the inside, we changed. And on the inside, you can change. You never have to be a victim of what you've been in the past or what other people have told you. There are new ways. There are people who can help you. Marriage is not for everybody, but it can be a great thing. And so I want to close with a Bible verse from Romans chapter 15. Do you have this, Meg? Not that one. Romans chapter 15, verses 4-7. Everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through the endurance taught in the Scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we might have hope. This is the same passage where Paul says the verse that I always use as the final blessing. Endurance, encouragement, hope. It's like what we need for a marriage or for our life. If you're single, you need the same things. May the God who gives endurance and encouragement give you the same attitude of mind toward each other that Christ Jesus had, so that with one mind and one voice, it's a blended voice, you may glorify God, the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. So accept one another, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. So, that's the challenge, learning how to love, learning how to listen, and for Lisa and I, learning how to walk together. And that was a trip that helped us really move forward in some great ways. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the patience of people in this room, for the challenges that they are willing to face and try to overcome in their own relationships, if they're married or they're not, or they're dealing with things from their past or just wondering about the future. Lord, we all need endurance and encouragement and hope and a goal, a purpose for our life. And so the Camino gives us that metaphor of maybe being on a pilgrimage and completing a goal and just finding our way one step at a time. So guide us today. Encourage everyone here that they can move forward, that things can grow and be better, and that starts with us. Thank you for my relationship with Lisa, now these 30 years, and the things I've learned and the way I've grown and that she's learned and the things that we're able to help others. And help us to keep growing in our love for each other, in our service towards other people, and in the example that we give. In Jesus' name, amen.